I'm Dave Tull from Pasadena City College, and this is a video where I want to discuss two important topics. One is how to play the Bossa Nova, a groove that's used a great deal on a lot of gigs and all kinds of recordings. It's the gentle cousin to the samba, and for American jazz drummers it's become a staple, so you want to know how to do it. The other thing I want to discuss today while I'm talking about the Bossa Nova is another very important topic, and that is the business of how to teach yourself a pattern that has multiple parts. There are a couple of different ways to go about it, and so as we talk about the Bossa Nova, I'm also going to talk about how to go about learning a new pattern. That's something you can apply to any pattern you're going to play with, whether it be a rock beat or something swing or a Latin groove or something like that. But the Bossa Nova is a great pattern to use this system with, and so it's a great way of demonstrating both of these things at once. This is being recorded for the one of the weeks of my Music 116 drum set techniques class, and hope that somebody who sees this video online might consider coming and taking this class sometime, or taking drum lessons at Pasadena City College. All right, let's talk about the Bossa Nova. First of all, let me just play a little bit of it and give you an idea of what the feel is all about. It has 4 parts to it, and this is the basic feel. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. The Bossa Nova comes from Brazil, and it's a beat that really didn't come into existence as a specific beat that was used on lots of records until sometime in the mid-1960s, when Antonio Carlos Jobim and João Gilberto and some others who were down there came up with this beautiful way of comping on the guitar and taking songs and having this flowing, gentle style. American jazz singers and people like Frank Sinatra and others loved the feel and started using it to treat American jazz standards that we had done, Cole Porter tunes, and also taking the Brazilian songs. One of the most iconic was probably Girl from Ipanema that came about at that time, and treating them with a Bossa Nova feel. The Bossa Nova is supposed to be very flowing. It's supposed to be gentle and romantic. If I'm playing a Bossa Nova, I'm picturing a little table right by the ocean on a little patio at a seaside cafe with a candle, and the sun has just set and the waves are just lapping gently on the shore. It's a very peaceful and flowing kind of a feel. This in contrast to the samba, which we won't get to in this class, except maybe I can show a little bit on the last day. But in any case, if you play samba, which also comes from Brazil, it's a little more celebrative, a little more dancing, a little bit more people out in the streets celebrating, sort of a street march kind of a feel. And so that is a key difference between the two. Bossa Nova that we're dealing with needs to be flowing and gentle. Let's take a look at the 4 parts. And by the way, the parts are illustrated on this sheet, which hopefully my sub is passing out. I don't know if I can get it close enough to the camera that you can really see it. But in any case, it's one of my handouts called The Bossa Nova. In the rhythm, the actual whole beat is written out on this top line up here. Here's the basic structure of the Bossa Nova. It's in 4, so you're counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Starting with the bass drum. The bass drum is the heartbeat of the thing, and it plays on beats 1 and 3 throughout, but it also has an 8th note right before that, so that you always have boom, 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 boom. One thing I should mention early in this process is that all the beats that come from a country like Brazil or Cuban beats or African things, when we're playing them at the drum set, we're really adapting a beat that was played originally by a group of musicians. So if you see a Brazilian rhythm section playing a bossa nova, or you see a Brazilian rhythm section playing a samba, you'll notice that each part that we incorporate into the drum set pattern is played by one person, or sometimes a couple of different people on a couple of instruments. In the case of the bass drum, the part that's being played down here by the right foot is really emulating an instrument called the surdo, which is fairly large. It ranges in size from fairly small to fairly large, but it's a large drum that is very, very deep. The closest thing we have really to the sound of a surdo is the floor tom. And usually you hear them play the surdo with a mallet rather than a stick, and it's done with their hands, and they'll muffle it, and the sound is something like this. In a very well organized Brazilian rhythm section, you'll sometimes hear 3 different pitched surdos that each have their own place in the part. So each of them has a part, and they interact so that you get a really beautiful rhythm underneath. And there are a million variations. It's important to understand that what I'm showing you today is what an American jazz drummer or American drummer would do, and it's a typical default sort of starting point. But as soon as you start listening around to Brazilian music, you start listening around to different drummers playing, you're going to see endless variations on this basic pattern. So if you look on YouTube, or you go see somebody play, or you look up a video being presented by somebody who is from Brazil, you may find variations, and that's perfectly okay. What I'm showing you today is what you can use in a situation with a jazz band, and it's on the drum set. So I'm taking the surdo pattern and I'm putting it down here. So I'm going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Notice that the bass drum is soft. It's a gentle beat. As soon as people see the bass drum pattern written out and notice that it's not that different coordinationally from what an 8th note rock beat would be. For instance, if I wanted to take that same bass drum pattern and put it with an 8th note rock beat, it works perfectly fine. Right? But the approach to the bass drum with a bossa nova, and in general with Brazilian beats, is much more gentle, trying to emulate that sound that we had with the floor tom. So I want to be careful not to have the bass drum sound like a cannon. It's supposed to sound very gentle. So this is what the bass drum is doing. 1, 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and that's about the speed of a typical bossa nova. Bossa nova is sometimes played slower than that, and it can be played a little bit faster, but it tends to be a slower feel. Samba, by contrast, tends to be faster, although samba is sometimes played slowly, and that little bit more aggressive character is usually inside a samba, as opposed to the very flowing and romantic feel of a bossa nova. All right, so the bass drum is playing this heartbeat pattern, and you'll see this question on the final, by the way. When you're playing a bossa nova or a samba, the right foot is playing a pattern that should sound like a heartbeat. It should sound gentle and light. So we have that pattern here, and to complement it, we have 2 and 4 on the hi-hat. Bossa nova is sometimes played on the closed hi-hat, and if you are playing the closed hi-hat version, then the left foot rests and doesn't play anything. Sometimes I'll play both. I'll play the left foot and the closed hi-hat, but it takes a lot of very quick timing so you don't get happening in between. So I would suggest that if you're playing with the closed hi-hat, just let your left foot rest. But I'm going to show you the version with the ride cymbal because I want all 4 limbs working. So here's what my feet are going to be doing. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Here's the bass drum. So it's going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Now I'll add the hi-hat. The hi-hat is on 2 and 4. And you get this walking feeling from the feet. 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2 and 3, So that's what the feet are doing. Not too difficult, really. I'm guessing that most of you could probably get that together relatively quickly, since these are patterns your feet are already relatively used to playing. Hi-hat and bass drum. Let's talk about the right hand. The right hand is either going to be playing on the ride cymbal, which is what I'm going to show you right now, or as I said, sometimes it's played on the closed hi-hat, in which case the left foot is not going to play. The right hand just plays all the eighth notes in the bar. It's emulating really something like a shaker. Notice how my hand sounds like a shaker. Anyway, that's the idea. We're bringing that over here to the ride cymbal. So now I'm going 1 and 2. Let me get the feet going, and I'll show you how the ride cymbal part adds on. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. Now those of you who are thinking back to eighth note rock might be noticing that coordinationally that's the same as what we were doing with eighth note rock, where you had all the eighth notes happening, although usually it was on the closed hi-hat. Now we're doing it on the ride cymbal. So we're still not venturing very far outside of something that you already know. The thing that makes the bossa nova really sound like a bossa nova is what's happening with the left hand. You may recall that we learned what a cross stick is, and just to review quickly, I'll show it. The cross stick is the stroke where you turn the stick around backwards. So I had it like this, but I'm going to turn it backwards, so I'm holding the other side. And I'm going to rest my left hand, this part of the heel of my hand, or whatever that's called, it's just laying right on the snare drum, and with a kind of a open and close doorknob kind of a motion, I'm going to bring the cross stick down about 2.5 inches in from the end of the stick, and you get this click. Okay, so that's what the cross stick is. So we're going to use the cross stick here. And by the way, while I'm talking about cross stick, if you have the stick too far out on the end, you get a very choked kind of sound. And if you have the rim way up on this part of the stick, you don't get much sound either. The place that sounds really nice is about 2 inches in from the end of the stick, and just that little area around where the logo is. You get a nice clean click there. All right, so I've got my feet going. The left hand plays a pattern that takes 2 bars to complete, where everything else repeats very regularly. The feet repeat every 2 beats. But the left hand plays a pattern that makes it into a 2-bar long pattern. And here it is. I'll get the feet going first. 1, 2, 4, 1, 2. All right, now I'll add the left hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what the bossa nova sounds like. I'm playing a little bit mechanically right now so that it sounds, so that it's very clear and easy to hear. The first job when you're learning a beat like this is to just get all the notes in the right place and just make sure that you're putting the left hand where it goes and figuring out the coordination between the left hand and each of the other parts. Once you get it happening and you have all the parts together, then you have to always take that last step of making sure that you're now making little adjustments that make the thing sing a little bit and flow a little bit. I'll talk about those a little bit later, but if I want to make the thing sound just a little bit less mechanical, bring a little bit of life to the hi-hat, maybe quiet down the hi-hat, the ride cymbal, maybe quiet down the cross stick just a little bit so that it blends with the cymbals a little bit more, lighten up on the bass drum just a bit, and it becomes a very nice flowing feel. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Nice, flowing, beautiful sound. Many of you may have heard the song Girl from Ipanema. It's posted on Canvas, so you can check it out. If you listen to the recording, you'll notice that there isn't a drummer on that recording. It's mainly piano, bass, guitar really drives the rhythm. There's some shaker. I don't even know how much percussion there is, but the feel of it is there. And that's the sound we're trying to bring, we American drummers are trying to bring to the Bossa Nova. So how do you teach yourself to play this beat? It's got all four parts, and the most common approach that most students do right away is the least productive. And that is to just go, well, I'm just going to try to do this. And they sort of try to do it, and the brain is struggling to send signals in 4 different places, and everything's going in the wrong place, and it doesn't work very well. And you can spend a lot of time flailing away like that and really not covering very much ground. So having an organized approach to how you're teaching yourself a pattern like this is critical. Drummers go through this all the time. We're constantly trying to learn more and more complex things where the left hand is doing something tricky or the foot is going in some funny place. So this is the first time in this class we've had 4 parts going, and your brain is really divided up. The only way the brain can get it together to send all the signals in the right place is to practice and get a clear picture from all angles of what all the different parts are and how they each interact, paying specific attention to how one part relates to another. So I want to show you 2 different approaches to learning this kind of a pattern, how to practice it. One I call the vertical approach, and this will be on the final, so get these clear in your head. You'll use them on all kinds of beats for down the line if you're working at the drums. The vertical approach is the business of taking 2 parts at a time and working them against each other, giving your brain a chance to just see how one and another part relate without the other parts, so you can give all of your attention to just those 2, and then going to 2 other parts and noticing how they relate. I've already started a little bit with the vertical approach in just the way that I showed you the beat. I started with just the feet. So a vertical approach would be taking 2 parts at a time and going around. Let's start with just the feet. Let's say I can't quite get the whole pattern going, but maybe I'm able to get my feet to play the correct parts. So I'm going to do that for a little while. I'm going to set up just the feet and see if I can get them going. As always, I want to make sure I know where the counts are. It doesn't help me to have this going. I can't add another part to it if I don't know where 1 is. So I need to pick a place where 1 is. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And it's great in the practice room to count out loud. It proves to you that you really are using the counts. When you're playing in a musical setting, you have to have the counts in your head. Once again, they're always there. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now I'm doing it kind of fast. When you're teaching yourself a pattern, you have to be patient. And so maybe you need to play it really slowly. If you have to go down here, that's fine. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Maybe it's got to be that slow. Fine. You do it there for a little while, your brain begins to figure out how to send those signals, and the ability to play it faster will come naturally. So, let's say I get up to where I can play the feet at the tempo of one of the songs on Canvas. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is go through all the way through from the top to the bottom of the song. Girl from Ipanema is about 3.5 or 4 minutes long, I'm guessing. So less than 5 minutes spent just printing your feet. I'm going to put on the recording, and as soon as I can identify where 1 is and begin counting, I'm going to get my feet going, and I'm going to use the song as a little block of time. Play from the beginning of the song all the way to the end with just the feet, and really have the discipline to stick with that and not add anything else until you get to the end of the song. We'll run across this in the next section as well. All of us have that feeling where you get it kind of going and it's working okay, and you get about 10 seconds into practicing and it feels like you got it. And you think, okay, I've got that. And you're going to go ahead and add something to it. The temptation to move on before you really have it ready is always there. It's very important that you give your brain a real block of minutes to print this thing, because you're not just printing it so that you can play it when you're doing it by itself. You want to print it well enough that you now can send your legs and your feet, say, do that thing we were doing before, and now I'm going to give my attention to adding something on top of it. So have the discipline to take a 3 or 4 minute long song and play all the way through it with just the feet while you listen to the song. And trust me that when you get to the end of that, you will have printed the feeling of that in your muscles a little better, and it'll be there for you more likely when you need to have your attention divided. Let's talk about other parts that we want to combine. What about the right hand? I'm going for the easy ones first. So what about the ride cymbal and the hi-hat? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... One and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. All right? That may seem relatively easy to you, but one of the great things about doing this approach is that when I'm working on just 2 parts at a time, I can give a lot more of my attention to how they're actually lining up. For instance, the hi-hat and the ride cymbal really need to sound like one when they come together. And the hi-hat has to have a nice solid chick to it and not be going yeesh. Like if you're focused on all the parts, it's easy for the hi-hat to become sort of an afterthought, and maybe it's kind of going nyeh. But we want chick. Now, when you're doing just the 2 parts, probably the hi-hat's real clean. But I can give a little bit of thought to that when I'm doing that. I can listen to whether these 2 are really together. There, that was better. Or whether they're flamming a little bit. Okay? The ear hears that little tiny difference. I can also think about the flow of the ride cymbal. When I was talking about making the bossa nova feel a little more romantic and a little less mechanical, one of the adjustments that I made was, instead of playing all the 8th notes on the ride cymbal absolutely steady and even, I varied it around a little bit and put a slight accent on 2 and 4 that goes right with the hi-hat. So instead of having this, I'm giving this kind of a feel with just a little lilt from my arm. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... It's like it's breathing now. Okay, so when I'm working on just 2 parts, I have enough attention to spread around to give a little bit of attention to that kind of a detail. I'm going to make this breathe just a tiny bit. I'm going to make sure these 2 are lining up together. I'm going to make sure the hi-hat sounds really nice. And I'm going to do the same thing I did with just the feet. I'm going to put on that same bossa nova track, and I'm going to play from the top of it all the way to the bottom with just these 2 parts. Okay? And once again, there's going to be that point about 30 seconds in where I'm going to be saying, what am I doing? I'm sitting here playing this. I can do this. I already know how to do this. I don't need to practice this anymore. Well, if you're in such a hurry that you can't give up 3.5 more minutes to give your brain a chance to really learn this, then you're in too much of a hurry to learn the drums. So go all the way to the end of the song. Trust me, it's worth doing. What have I not done? Feet, right foot, right hand. Same thing. Take that all the way down. Listen to hear whether these 2 really line up together. Are they really as one, or am I getting... And this is a place where I can listen to this stream of 8th notes and make sure they're nice and even and that they have that same flow I was talking about. I haven't brought the left hand in because that's coordinationally the hardest part. Maybe I'll try just the hands together. Now, to get the left hand part in my head, I've got to be able to read a little bit. That means I have to notice that that left hand part plays in the first bar, it plays on 1, it plays on the and of 2, it plays on 4. In the second bar, it plays on the and of 2, and it plays on the, it plays on 2 and the and of 3. You may have to count that out. Go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. and you may have to go through with the counts and do just the left hand to get that settled. That's fine, but get so you can play it. And again, this is one of those places where keeping the counts in your head is critical. How can you possibly put these in the right place if you don't know exactly where the and of 3 is? Now maybe I can add it to the right hand. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 Okay, so if I get so I can do that, maybe I can take that through the song one time all the way through. Give my brain a chance to figure out this part. Bass drum and cross stick, another tricky one. Okay, I want to listen for places where they come together. I want to also pay specific attention to places where maybe they play together and somebody else goes on. If you look at the pattern, you can take a look at the line that is that shows the entire pattern. The 1, 2, 3. It's the fourth line down on this page. You have the whole pattern written out there. Notice. Oh no, the cross stick isn't in there. But if you notice, on the and of 2 leading to 3, the cross stick and the bass drum play together on the and of 2, and the bass drum goes on by itself. So you have this. As far as the brain is concerned, that's kind of a tricky moment. You got to send the same signal to both, and then have the other one continue while the left hand doesn't. I'm also looking for places where they're right next to each other. Wow, that's kind of neat. As I'm getting to the end of the first bar, I'm playing on 4 here, and then the next 2 eighth notes are in the bass drum, so I have this little fragment. It's not hard to play that, but if I notice how those 2 interact together, it makes it easier for my brain to picture it when it's time to play it. There's that little fragment. Let me play the whole pattern. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So I'm going to go across and just notice how sometimes they're together. Figure out how that works. Notice where it is that maybe a cross stick note comes right after a bass drum note. Notice where a cross stick note leads to 2. Consciously noticing those little details helps your brain get a clear picture of what's going on. Hi-hat and cross stick is another one you can do. You have to have the counts in your head for this one because it's so open. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The idea is that each time you take a combination of 2 parts and you go around so you've done all possibilities, it's giving your brain things that it can hang on to later on when you're trying to do multiple parts. And the possibility of getting all 4 things going is a little bit more likely because there are places where your hands and your feet know where to go. So you don't have to be worrying so much about sending all the parts. So that's the vertical approach. It's all about taking 2 parts or sometimes 3 at a time, grouping things in certain ways and playing them together and noticing how the parts interact. Then when I get the whole piece together, even after just a little bit that we've talked about, you're probably able to notice some of the things that I talked about. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Okay. One of my favorite little things is the interaction between the hi-hat and the cross stick. When I was just doing it a minute ago, I failed to mention there are some places in this pattern where you either get chica or you get kachi between the 2 of them. So one of the best ones is right at the end, leading up to beat. I guess it's beat 4. The and of 3 in the cross stick, leading to 4 in the hi-hat, where you get this little thing, and the ear hears that down inside. That little thing. So if I notice that, And I sort of feel that that's in there, and I hear that as part of the melody that is being created here. And I know that little chica is down in there. That's the kind of thing that helps me learn it. This is the vertical approach. And hopefully, if you spend a little bit of time like that, it's a little easier to then go back to that song that you've been playing and get all the parts going. There is another way, and sometimes these two ways of learning something can work together. This is one of those examples. The other way of approaching this is on a pattern such as this one, where you have three relatively regular repetitive parts that you can get together fairly easily, and then there's one rogue part, which in this case is the left hand, that isn't quite as easy. It's a little harder to remember what it is. It requires a little bit of reading, and it has some coordinational struggles between it and other parts of the kit. So this is what I call the horizontal approach. The horizontal approach is about getting three parts together, or two parts together, or whatever it is you're able to do that you can control and manage. Get those going, and then add the difficult part one note at a time until you go across and have the whole pattern together. It's about giving your mind a methodical, gradual opportunity to take a look at each place in the bar where the difficult part has to play and see what's going on there. Before I show you this, I want you to know that your first reaction is going to be like, oh, that's going to take forever. This will take forever. I can't go across each note. Oh, God, what are there, 5 notes? I can't take that much time. Well, first of all, you can. And second of all, it takes longer to keep flailing away and just trying to do the whole thing. You'll flail for 25, 30 minutes, struggling to get your left hand to just play the whole thing, and you won't actually achieve it because the brain remains in a state of confusion when you do that. The thing that makes it quick is that you allow the brain to have a methodical approach to learning the thing, and actually it takes less time to go about it this way. So, follow me. In this pattern, most of you, without too much practice, can probably get the ride cymbal and the feet going without the left hand. So we have this, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... All right. Not too complex, really, because it's fairly repetitive. Nobody's having to do anything weird. When you try to throw that left hand in, the left hand can't figure out where to go, or if you get the left hand in the right place, the hi-hat will suddenly go in a weird place because coordinationally your brain is trying to figure out how to send these signals. So here's how you go about this. And this is the horizontal approach, which you will also be asked about on the final. It's about taking this, in this case, this 5-note pattern, and going one note at a time. And just like the previous section where we were going, and I said you have to have the discipline to give your brain the time to really get it printed, we really have that here. We're going to go one note at a time across, but each time, we're not going to add the next note until the one you had before is really settled. Again, maybe we're going to practice with a recording that's 4 or 5 minutes long. And use that as your template so you can make sure you don't bail out and not give your brain the chance. The repetition is what gets it, makes it work. So, I get the feet going. If you notice, we can turn this page over now and look at page 2, which says learn it using the horizontal approach, okay, the horizontal system. So on the top line, I have written out just the feet, which is what I was just playing just now. On the second line, I am adding only the first left-hand note, which comes on beat 1 of the first bar. That's the only note from the left-hand pattern that I'm going to add. I'm going to keep the 2-bar long phrase. This is a 2-bar long pattern. So I'm going to keep looping 2 bars, and every time I come around the 2 bars, I'm going to put my left hand right on beat 1, just like it's written, and I'm not going to add any other notes. So here's my feet, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Now the next time around, I'm going to add my left hand on one note. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. I got to keep the counts in my head. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 Now you want to look for little things. First of all, you want to get that left-hand note in the place where it's supposed to be, and you have to have the counts in your head so you're sure of it. But you also want to watch around the other three parts and see what changes as a result of you sending a signal down your left hand to do a cross stick. For instance, you might find that your ride cymbal is doing this nice flowing stream of eighth notes, and when you go to play the left hand on one, your right hand instinctively just goes with it. So you have... The brain loves to send the same signal to two limbs. It's a lot simpler, right? So it takes a little bit of thought. You have to watch for whether maybe that's happening. When I do an accent with my left hand, is my right hand automatically joining it? Or something else might be changing, like the hi-hat might jump in where it's not supposed to be. You're playing 2 and 4 over here, but when you go to play 1 here, maybe the hi-hat's going to try to play along at the same time. So I have to not only be watching that I'm putting this in the right place, but I have to also be watching to see that the three parts that I had started with aren't changing around. Changes can be adding a note to some other part where they didn't play a note before, or leaving out a note that normally would be played. Sometimes the note that gets left out or added isn't even at the same time as the note you're trying to add, because the brain just gets confused and throws it in a weird place or takes a note out. So you have to listen to what you're doing and really be careful and make sure that everybody is staying where they're supposed to be. So I'm going to take the business with just the one note, and I'm going to play it for at least a couple of minutes. If you need to use a clock or a stopwatch, that's a great way of making yourself do it. If you just sort of do it open without thinking about it, you'll probably do it, get it working, and you'll probably play it about 15 or 20 seconds before you start saying, well, I think I got this. And you have to trust me that you've got to keep going with it. Give yourself a good solid 2 minutes, maybe even more. Every time you come back around and print it, the brain is learning it just a little bit more. Remember that you're trying to learn to do this note and the parts that go with it so that they're so printed that when you go to add another note, you can count on this one to be here for you. So, I'm going to play this for 15 seconds, just with the one note, or maybe all the way through the song that I've been practicing with. I'm going to keep the counts, I'm going to check the parts around, and look for anything strange that's going on. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... One of the things that I look for when I get to the end of that process and I'm starting to feel settled is I look for how I'm carrying my limbs. Normally I play pretty relaxed, but if I'm trying to do something new, it's very natural for me to start carrying a bunch of tension in my shoulders or between my shoulder blades, or maybe I'm holding my wrist really stiff when I don't usually do that, or my little finger is sticking out for some reason, or my neck is like this. Who knows? The body does all kinds of curious things with tension when you're trying to do something unfamiliar. So one of the last things you can check for when you get to the end of that 3 or 4 minutes that you're doing a given little spot is to check around and see. Take a couple of deep breaths and see if you can release your shoulders, release your elbows. Make sure that you're not carrying new tension or holding your hands in some new weird position. Maybe you're suddenly doing this with the cross stick, and those things tend to happen involuntarily. You don't even realize it. So you need to check around and go, why am I doing that? My wrist needs to be relaxed. Everything should be in a very comfortable position. All right, so we're doing the horizontal approach. That means that I've got the feet and the cymbals going, and I've added one note. Now I'm going to go down to the next line in the process, which is the third line on page 2. I'm going to keep the note that I've added, that I started with, and now in the left hand, I'm going to add the next note, which is on the and of 2. First thing I got to do is make sure I know where that is. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, and that's how it works. You got to use the counts. Now take that and put it with the feet. So I'm going to go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now start with the note you already know. Get that up and running a few times around the loop, and then add in the next one, using the counts to make sure you know where you're putting it. So I'll do that. Here's the feet. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. Here's the left hand. 3 Now, maybe when I do this, I can refer back to the work I did with the vertical system, and I can remember that that and of 2, the second note that I'm doing with the cross stick here, that's the one where the bass drum and the cross stick play together, and then the right foot goes on. You have this little fragment. So you can go like, oh yeah, that's right. I remember I was thinking about that. Oh right, that's that little thing. I kind of remember it. A little hard, but I remember it. Next time you go around to play it, look for that little spot, and you go, oh right, I know about that thing. So when I go to go, I can be gearing up and laying for that a little bit, and the work I did with the vertical system earlier can now come in and help me a little bit as I look one note at a time across. Just like with the first note, I'm not going to go on until I've really got this nailed down, and it's going to be at least a few minutes of running just the 2 notes. Be patient, trust me. There are only 5 notes in this left-hand pattern, so if you give each one of them 5 minutes, you're not even using a half an hour. So, maybe I put on Girl from Ipanema and I play through with just those 2 notes. That's perfectly fine. You can see how this system works. Once I get the 2 notes together, then I'm going to add the 3rd one. Always keeping the 2 that you had that were settled, and adding the next one, and never adding another one until the new note you've just added feels totally settled. You want to listen for how it lines up to other parts. You want to use the counts to make sure that it's really in the right place, that it's not being put in some strange place. Give your ears and thought to the other parts to make sure they're not changing while you keep adding. Each time you add another part, there may be some new coordinational wrinkle that makes your hi-hat go in a funny place or make you put some big accent in where it wasn't supposed to be. Okay? But before you know it, you're to the other side of the pattern, and now you've got all the notes in place. Your brain has an extremely clear view of each one of those notes. And not only that, but you're very familiar with how all the parts interact. So when you go to play the thing, you're far more likely to make it sound like a piece of music and less mechanical. Frequently people learn a pattern like this and they're satisfied to just get all the notes in one place, but it sounds kind of machine-like. I always joke around that there's I can play the Casio Bossa Nova, you know, that you get off the keyboards. It sounds like this. I can only do that for a couple of minutes because it blows up my wrist. But we all laugh about that. But the point is, that's the way Bossa Nova can sound sometimes when somebody's thinking only about getting all the notes in place and not about how all the parts interact. If you have your ear to the whole pattern and you can step away just a little bit and start thinking about the romance of it and start thinking about how this beat is supposed to feel, then it starts to live a little bit. Here we go. 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3. All start. Girl from Ipanema goes walking when she passes one. When she finds light comes, sweet so beautiful. And when she passes one, I'm singing the song. I don't expect you to sing and play at the same time. I'm sort of doing that instead of playing along with the recording, but I'm doing it as a way of getting back in touch with what this groove is supposed to feel like. It's supposed to be flowing and light and romantic and beautiful, and so you have to really work hard to get it to that level. The Bossa Nova, as I said, can be played on the closed hi-hat, which is a little bit simpler coordinationally. And as I mentioned earlier, which may have been confusing then, but now I can show you what I mean, I frequently will keep the hi-hat with my foot on 2 and 4, even though I'm playing on the closed hi-hat. It takes a little bit of quickness with your left foot, or you end up with this in the middle of it. But it does add a little bit of shape, kind of like what I was talking about on the ride cymbal. couple of things to notice that I'm not doing, and I'm going to demonstrate them so that you can listen for yourself. I'm not smashing the hi-hat like I'm trying to kill it. Okay? You have to use your fingers and let the thing flow a little bit. The bass drum does not sound like a cannon. Nor is the bass drum so shy that I can't hear it. Okay, so you have to use your leg and really make sure it's balanced. Remember that question from the midterm? You'll see it again on the final. When you're playing a beat that has multiple parts, you have to really think about, listen to all the parts and make sure they're balanced. One of the ones that can get out of control is the cross stick. It's very easy for it to start sounding like a gunshot. Nobody wants to hear that, especially in a romantic restaurant. Cross stick needs to be down where it gets heard in amongst the cymbals, so you hear all the little parts going ka-cha, cha-boom, boom. Now, if you're a little more advanced, there are a couple of things to know. One is that the left-hand cross-stick pattern can be played on a tom-tom. It can be played on the snare drum lightly. The other thing is that pattern does get varied around. So if you listen to a jazz drummer playing, frequently you'll hear them establish the basic pattern, but they'll start playing around with other patterns in the left hand that vary away from that original one, and that's perfectly fine. When you go to listen to other drummers playing Brazilian music, you're going to hear every possible variation. There are people who use shakers at the drums. There are people who play different patterns on the hi-hat. There are people who put accents in different places on the ride cymbal, and all of them are correct. There's no wrong way, really, to play unless you're playing stiff and loud. But the basic meat and potatoes components are a nice heartbeat from the bass drum and a stream of eighth notes sailing over the top that's very light and gliding like a shaker, and then some kind of a rhythmic cross stick or other pattern that repeats over the course of 2 bars so that the pattern has a 2-bar long feel and has a little bit of this interaction going on. That is the 2 things I talked about, Bossa Nova and the vertical and horizontal approaches. Hopefully this sheet is being passed out today. You can take this and spend some time. This is the last beat I'm going to present for you to learn this semester. And I would love to hear you play it when I come back for the last class meeting. It'd be great to hear people do the best they can with it, even if you can't get all 4 parts going, because it's just such a great beat. I really love it. It's very beautiful. So that's about it for this lesson. It's been long enough already. I'll be back soon. If things are timing out the way they should, while you're watching this, I'm probably in Europe someplace. But I will see you in a week. We will review for the final. We will have a chance to hear the Bossa Nova. We'll have a chance to practice what we're going to do during the playing portion of the final, which will involve playing some of these beats, not necessarily Bossa Nova if you don't have it together, but some of the other ones we've done while reading a small drum part. And I will look forward to getting back with you next week. So until then, this is Dave Tull from Pasadena City College, and we'll see you soon.